Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey. Thank you again for joining me this week. I am so appreciative of the work I'm able to do to bring important information to our seniors and their families. And once again, we have a very important topic to discuss today. I am here today with Brandi Hackett. Brandi and I go way back, and Brandi is with Metro Atlanta Medical Alert. Connect America is the parent company. And we're going to talk about keeping folks safe and in the home and some chronic medical conditions that might warrant the need of a medical alert. We're going to talk to you about the ins and outs of what exactly a medical alert is. And I'm going to let you tell the rest of the story, Brandi. But first of all, welcome and thank you again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't we start by giving your background, because you have a very interesting, varied background, which I think makes you even better in this position, talking about medical alert and how to help seniors stay in their home safely.
Okay. My background is primarily focused in medical social work. I'm actually a master's level medical social worker, and I've spent my time primarily working with older adults as well as adults with disabilities. I've spent the last almost 10 years in a lot of different segments of healthcare. So I've worked in hospice, I've worked for a skilled nursing facility, I even spent a year working in a funeral home helping people pre-coordinate services. So my focus has been primarily with those 40 and above, but I would say that I've spent the majority of time with those in excess of 65 years.
And I know when I first met you, you were in the nursing home environment as a social worker. And one of the things that struck me most when I met Brandi, as I went through my days going to facilities, I met a lot of folks, was truly your passion for seniors and advocacy for getting them the right care, the right resources, and really fighting for them to get the best care from those resources as well. So Brandi is someone that really I kind of filed back in my brain and said, someday I'm going to work even more closely with her because she has that passion and advocacy. So I'm so grateful that after all these years, we're together again and we're here to educate the community. So now you're with, is it Connect America or
Connect America is actually
Metro
the parent company. They have started a brand new healthcare division, and they have asked me to come on board here in Metro Atlanta. And my job will be to intercede between care providers, so those helping seniors, those out in the field, both in nonprofit and for-profit agencies, so that they're able to have a point person to go to in this field to ask questions, to receive education, etc.
So let's back up just a minute.
You're fine.
And let's talk about what is Metro Atlanta Medical Alert, aka parent company Connect America, because it doesn't really tell the story of what it is that you do.
Yes. What we primarily focus is something called personal emergency response systems. And what these are pendants that are either worn or carried by the person that they have on their person. So in the case of an emergency, they would be able to press one simple button and receive notification to either emergency medical services or their family members in case of an emergency, fall, etc. And our company is a wonderful asset solely because it provides two methods of this. Most people are well aware of the one that's based in their home, and this tends to run off of a landline, so they're able to plug it into their standard phone system that they have. They put on either our waterproof pendant around their neck or the wrist pendant, and then they're able to utilize that in their home so that in the case of a fall, accident, etc., they're able to press that and at the touch of a button have access to those services.
So how does it work? Is it like a baby monitor? So you plug in a main central unit and then that speaks to what they're wearing?
Not exactly. It's more of a two-way form of communication. So you have to imagine that the pendant is going to activate this form of communication. So when they press the button, they're going to hear from a member of our customer service team that will respond immediately to their needs. So they're able to do something called triage. So they're able to say, "Hi, Miss Jones, we see that you've pressed your pendant. Are you needing something right now? And so they're able to, if they can physically hear Miss Jones, then she's able to say, listen, I've had a fall. Listen, I'm frightened. I hear something out back that seems that it's coming into the back door. I've had an accident. I feel like I'm having a heart attack. Whatever symptoms she's presenting with, she's able to just say, this is what I need. If for some reason the pendant is pressed and Miss Jones is nonverbal, which is the case with a lot of medical conditions where you might be having those symptoms and you lose your ability to speak, then EMS and the family members would automatically be contacted. So that is how it functions. So it becomes sort of a two-way voice system in the home. And then we also have a mobile option, which is a very neat new piece of technology.
Before we talk about that, I would just want to delve into this a little bit more. So you get it set up, you plug in something to the wall that will allow the pendant to work so that they can contact the central station that will triage them if something were to happen.
Yes, ma'am. It's a machine that's just slightly larger than a shoebox, a little more square than that, but it's about the same size.
And what do they put it in the kitchen typically?
They put it near their main phone line, and it actually has about a 600-foot range to the unit.
That was my next question. How far does that reach?
It's a 600-foot range, which is a great asset to this type of service because many have a much shorter range. So even if they're out in the yard or on the patio and they're taking care of their garden, etc., as long as they are within 600 feet of the unit and press the button, then they would have immediate access. Now, if you're in the yard, often they wouldn't be able to hear you. So it would be more of an automatic call to EMS just to make sure that they're notified that there is an emergency.
Okay, and let me ask you this too. If they do press the button and then the talking two-way goes and they fell or they didn't feel good but they're okay, I assume upon setup you're going to have a list of next of kin, emergency contacts. Is the policy to automatically call the family either way so that the family knows? Okay, because I think that would be important. They might brush it off and not tell, but that's a big indication of what might come in the future too.
And we primarily do respect the wishes of the person. So it is more automatic, but in the case that they completely say we can't, then we do have to follow the wishes. But with a family member, we definitely have a list of kin. We have multiple people that we can contact. And often these systems are also set up to work with other healthcare providers, such as home health, hospice, home care agencies, so that they can also be notified of what has occurred.
That's terrific. And then the home health or the hospice can send the nurse out right away to assess, and you're keeping them out of the hospital
there you go.
Again.
Which is a huge point right now, especially with changes to Medicare regulations, that the reoccurrence of going back into the hospital with a similar medical condition is being less and less encouraged, that they're putting a lot more pressure on healthcare staff to attempt to best keep people out of the hospital for
my God.
minutes.
And you know what? I'm going to get on a soapbox for a minute, and this doesn't really have to do with Medical Alert, but I have to say it anyway. Speaking of Medicare changes, but not only because of Medicare changes, but because of insurance changes and the cost of health care. My son went for a routine doctor visit last week, and we used to pay a copay, and then it would be taken care of. I went for a routine pap smear, which was 2 years late. So I'm like, okay, finally, I'll get in. They booked me on Valentine's Day. That was fun. But I got the bill last week. And I am just furious over our healthcare system. Now we don't pay copays. Now we pay 80/20 of absolutely everything, even routine visits. And that pap smear, this is way too much information to tell on the radio, but I believe that it will help everybody. I got a $207 bill from the lab, plus the $100 and something bill from the physician, plus the $40 copay. So for this routine procedure that costs maybe $15, it's $350. So not only because of Medicare regulations and trying to keep folks out of the hospital and how everybody is accountable for that now under the Accountable Care Act, but for financial reasons, especially with our elderly that are on a strict budget, we have got to find a way to take better care of them without just draining their finances. I'm really worried about the state of healthcare. And I'll get off my soapbox.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It is a definite thing to worry about. And I think, it in multiple senses of that. I mean, we're looking at an extended life expectancy. which is a wonderful thing. That's not something that we should be unhappy with, but with that will lead to a higher incidence of dementia, higher incidence of chronic illness, et cetera, because as people age, so does their body. And so we're going to be dealing with chronic conditions that we might have never seen the amount of what we're about to deal with. The boomers are bringing such an increase to the population group as a whole. And again, these people are wanting to be more active. They're wanting to stay as healthy as they can. And I think they're going to attempt to put into place things that can be more proactive instead of reactive. And I think that's where we would help to factor in. Because I think just the sense of security that it gives relieves a lot of the anxiety that people can feel.
Absolutely.
And then that, as well as some of the other things we'll talk about a little later, about some changes and modifications that can be made into the home to promote safety, I think will lead to a different state of condition.
It's all about keeping the crisis to a minimum.
Of course.
And all the benefits of that, the emotional benefits, the physical benefits, the psychological benefits, the financial benefits, as we were talking about. So I love that your system is proactive and can help patients and their family members and all the resources, like you said, the home health agencies or the hospice agencies, take better care of the patient and keep them at home and out of the hospital. That's just beneficial all the way around. Okay, so we talked about the in-home personal emergency response system and how that works, and it's the size of a small radio, and you just wear it around your neck or around your wrist. Let me ask you this. How easy is it to take that off?
The pendant?
The pendant or the wrist. How would you choose which one is better?
We say it's all about fashion sense. Usually we see that men tend to go with a wrist pendant. Ladies tend to go with a neck pendant. They're going to act very similar to either a watch or a necklace. So the pendant will slip over the head, similar to a necklace style pendant. Most people will wear it sort of under their clothing.
I was going to say, probably
there.
Men would want that because then you can't see it, right?
Well, it depends.
Who knows?
The wrist pendant is quite stylish. So no, but it does look very close to a watch. So it would have the same band style as a watch, and that is how that is placed on it. And it's important to know both are waterproof. So when they're in the shower, which is a huge place where multiple injuries occur, they are not removing that, because what I've found in the field is when someone has an injury or an occurrence, even if they have a cell phone or another device, sometimes it is still out of reach, especially in the shower, because people can't take that with them. But the pendant is very light. Both systems are very light, so they are quite comfortable to wear. I actually recently, because of this new position, I actually wore a pendant for the entirety of the day to see if it provided any stress around the neck, etc. And it was actually quite comfortable. And, once you sort of got used to the fact, just like putting on a new necklace, it was very, very easy to wear.
And can they get both, or do they have to choose, or is it more
We tend to have them
costly,
choose. There is no additional cost, but for like a husband and wife pair for the in-home unit, they can have two pendants.
I see.
So the husband can choose the wrist style pendant and the wife the neck pendant, or vice versa. So if there are multiple people in the home utilizing the in-home system, then they can have their choice of pendant.
Yeah, because my concern is the only way it's going to work is if you have it on.
Very true.
So
very
maybe
true.
the wrist is better because it's like a watch and you get used to it. Yeah.
It really depends on the person and their preference.
Okay.
The comment that we keep hearing is ours is abnormally light compared to some of the other systems. So it is an easy thing to wear, like I said, that would provide little to no stress. It's also breakaway, which is a very important safety feature. So if it becomes entangled, it will actually tear away from the neck. So there's much less in risk for things like choking, etc. Okay. So, there are some safety components built into that, which is very important.
And does it buzz when you go beyond the 600 feet to let you know you're too far or something?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay.
It's not like a dog collar.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking because you may think that you're protected.
Yeah.
But okay, so now that I've exhausted the in-home, let's talk about you have a mobile
We do.
unit.
We have one that will go with the person. And I'll be honest, as a social worker, when I first saw the demo of this unit, my supervisor brought it and put it in front of me at the table. My whole concept was, where can I sign? I was so excited by this technology and by this mechanism because it's going to be basically the same size as a standard flip phone. So it's going to be a similar size. It is then carried with the person, and we have a belt attachment where they can actually attach it to the side of the belt or in their pocket, and it actually runs off of wireless technology through AT&T. So as long as there is moderate to above signal, then the person would have access to that exact same two-way method of communication. So let's take, for example, a 75-year-old gentleman that loves to play golf by himself on Sunday mornings. That's his tradition. That's what he's always done. Let's say that the gentleman 2 years ago had heart surgery and has had 3 heart attacks. Well, his likelihood of having further incident is huge.
And you've got to get to a heart attack victim very quickly.
Most conditions are the faster you can treat or triage, the better quality of life is hoped for through the process. But for this, it would act the exact same way. So you would have the system, there would be a button in the center, you would press it, you would get the light activation showing that we have received the call, and you would have an immediate two-way conversation with our staff. They would then triage. If you need things sent out, etc., they would be able to do that. But what I love about this system is 2 things. The first, it has GPS technology built in.
Oh, that's great.
And second, if it's nonverbal, which, as we talked about before, there are certain situations where the person is unable to speak, we would have a physical description of that person. So let's say this guy is 5'9", silver hair, large build. We would have all that information in our system. So let's say he's in a department store dressing room and nonverbal, but we've received the notification that he most likely needs assistance. So what we would do is we would contact EMS and say, we have a blank-year-old gentleman with this build and this physical characteristics, and he is within a 20-foot radius, because that's what the GPS does. It actually sends us to about a 20-foot radius of that person. So we're able to say we know he's there in this area, and EMS can more quickly get to them, especially in a congested spot where they're sent to a place, but it's hard unless you have a description to find that person. So, especially behind closed doors, such as bathrooms, dressing rooms, etc.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to tell you another story. I'm in a very serious relationship, and not too long ago, I was watching my boyfriend's granddaughter, and he was scheduled to come to my home at about 7 o'clock to watch her with me. Now, this is his granddaughter, and he wouldn't miss it. And his father died of a heart attack, and heart attacks run in his family, and he's 50-something. And come 5:30, I hadn't heard from him. So I started to text and call and didn't hear back, and I thought, well, maybe he's in the shower or whatever. Come 6:30, I still hadn't heard from him. He's supposed to be at my house in a half hour. Couldn't find him. Wasn't answering the phone. And I have to tell you, as a significant other, as a family member, what a feeling that is.
Of course.
So I got someone to watch the baby, got in the car to drive to his house. Now brain is going a mile a minute, and I'm thinking he had a heart attack, because it's just very uncharacteristic not to be able to get in touch, especially when he's supposed to be with me.
Of course.
And of course I didn't stop for 3 full seconds at a stop sign and got pulled over. And so now I'm a mess. And the policeman says, you really need to call EMS. And I said, but I don't know where he is. He could be in the car, in a ditch somewhere on the way home from work, or he could be in his room sleeping and not here. I don't know. Or he could be in the shower. And what a feeling that was. And so as you're talking, I mean, this is a healthy 50-something-year-old, but it's in the back of our mind because heart attacks run in the family.
Of course.
So as you're speaking, I'm not even thinking of people with chronic conditions. I'm thinking there's probably a whole lot more people in the population. And God, I wish he had that. And I mean, we're talking 50-something and healthy, works out every day. But I lived through that. And that was the longest 2 hours of my life. And so, gosh, I'm thinking we're talking about the senior market, but there's a huge reason why even a healthy person could have this if heart attacks run in your family.
Of course. Well, and I think the piece is that so many people rely on their cell phones, which is a great piece of technology to have that typically will allow you to speak to someone A to B whenever you need something. But I know a lot of people have what's called smartphones, which in my case is much smarter than I am. So in the case of a medical emergency, it would be very difficult for me to enter my passcode, then go to the phone, then find who I'm calling, and then and we're talking about conditions that could include some type of oxygen loss to the brain. And at that point, we're not thinking very clearly. So the more difficult the process is, the harder it would be to get help. And I think what's so neat about the mobile unit is it's portable.
And the GPS, because then you'd be able to pinpoint, right? I could have known right away where he was.
There you go. And the other portion is when you take it back home, you're going to want to charge it because it's just like a cell phone. So you're going to put it on the mobile unit, on the permanent unit in the home to charge. And then what you're going to do is put on either the wrist pendant or the neck pendant. Mm-hmm. So it becomes actually both systems. And this system is also there for people with no landline, which many people are no longer keeping their landline to cut cost, etc. So this would be the method and the mechanism that would be used if someone either did not have a landline or was not what I consider homebound or primarily having needs in the home.
Okay, so we have so much more to talk about because as you're talking, my brain's going a mile a minute. But what I want you to do first is to give your contact information. If, as we're talking, someone is listening and you're thinking, you know what, for safety and for peace of mind for my loved one, I want to talk to Brandi and see about what I can do to get this for my loved one. How do they get in touch with you?
Well, there's a couple ways. Personally, to get in touch with me, I would recommend one of two methods. Either reaching out to me by my personal email, which is Brandi Hackett, BrandiHackett @gmail.com, or you can also find me on LinkedIn, which many people are on that. Also, you can call if you have general information to customer service, which is 1-800-215-4206. And also we have information on our website, which is www.medalert.net.
So if they call that 800 number, and again, I'm going to give that 800-215-4206. Did I get that right? Because I don't have my glasses on. You can call customer service and they will answer any one of your questions. And if you want to go further and talk to Brandi herself, I'm a little subjective, they'll give you her information.
Of course.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I want to talk about cost. I want to talk about mobile unit versus in-home unit, if you should get both. And I have so many more questions and I want to talk about stories on how you've helped. But as always, I never think I'm going to have enough information for the whole show, and then we always run out of time. So just to recap, we have in-home units, which are run on a landline, mm-hmm. and they go 600 feet. Mm-hmm. And that is with a wrist or a necklace type, very lightweight pendant, mm-hmm. where you just push a button, and everything else is done for you if you can just get enough strength to push mm-hmm. a button. And then we have the mobile unit, which is like a flip-top cell phone, mm-hmm. and you can carry it on your belt.
It doesn't flip, but it's the similar size of a cell phone.
Okay. Mm-hmm. One question, if you're going to get the mobile unit, why would you need the home unit?
Typically, people have one or the other because the mobile unit, as we talked about, sort of transforms to the in-home unit with the same exact range once they're home.
Yeah.
So
is it more expensive?
It is because the technology is slightly more advanced. But we see people do the mobile unit for two reasons, primarily because they're mobile also, or because they do not have a landline.
And does the mobile unit go past 600 feet?
No, it's the same. Because the unit itself would be on the person at the time of need. So they would either have it on their belt or pocket. And so they would have it on the person.
Oh, right.
And we do prefer that is only used with one pendant.
Okay.
Instead of the possibility of two, solely because, let's say, the wife has the mobile one at Kroger. Well, that's a good beyond 600 feet from the husband at home that might need it.
Okay.
So we do not encourage the use of two on the mobile unit.
Okay, I have so many more questions, but we have to take a break first.
Fine.
So stay with me. We're going to talk about cost. We're going to talk about mobile versus in-home a little bit more because I think I might have created a little bit of confusion there. And we're going to tell some stories and give you some more information about whether or not you should decide to call and investigate this as an option for you and your loved one. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Jean Pete, and again, I'm here with Brandi Hackett from Metro Atlanta Medical Alert, which is owned by parent company Connect America, and we are talking about personal emergency response systems. So, like I said, Brandi, before the break, I have lots more questions for you, and I think I might have confused matters when we were talking about the in-home unit versus the mobile unit. So, real quick, I just want to kind of give a recap of what your offerings are, and then I'll go back into some of the questions to make some clarity for maybe a little bit of the confusion before break.
Okay. We have two options. One being an in-home unit where the person would basically plug the system into their landline, and this would become their standard unit. Now, this is meant for people that find that they have increased safety risk in their home setting, or they might be a person that is in their home setting the majority of the time. You know, I'll have families that'll say, well, if mom goes out of the house, it's with me to go to church or a doctor's appointment, etc. So if the safety risk is primarily in the home and they do have the landline, then the in-home unit is, and very well could be, their best option.
And they have to have a landline.
They do for the in-home unit, yes.
Okay, because a lot of people have gotten rid of their landlines now. Okay, so now that we've gotten that, you have the in-home unit, you're wearing a pendant or a bracelet. If you do the mobile unit, then you have what looks like a cell phone that can go onto a belt or in your pocket or what have you.
Yes.
Do you also get a bracelet?
You do.
Okay.
Because when you come home, what you're going to do is put it on the device to charge.
I see.
And you have to imagine that that would be just like the in-home unit.
Okay.
So you would put on then, because if you have safety risk in the community, you probably still have safety risk at home.
Right.
So you would put on the pendant, and again, you would have the choice. And again, we prefer that this is for one person, solely because
Sure.
the unit that is doing the communication is mobile. So we do not want it to be separated from the person that has the need. So once you get
that
home,
would be confusing.
Oh, yes. Well, it would just
I
not
bet
work.
that happens. Okay.
Period. So what would happen is they would come home, they would put it on the unit to charge, and then they would slide on either the wrist pendant or the neck pendant, their choice, and then they would wear that all of the time that they're home.
And in essence, the mobile unit becomes an in-home unit because
There you
now
go.
you're at a 600-foot
There you go.
width or whatever, 600-foot
Range.
distance, range. Thank you.
You're fine.
I think I need more coffee this morning. Okay, I got it. So I hope that we clarified that for the confusion I created prior to the break. Now, let's talk about cost, because as you're talking, I'm thinking, I want the mobile unit. It's wireless. I don't have to worry about a phone line. It is with me all the time. I don't have to worry about 600 feet unless I'm charging. So why wouldn't somebody get a mobile unit? Unless they don't have Wi-Fi in the home, I guess.
Well, unless they do not have the landline. Most people will go with the mobile unit if that person is portable.
Is it much more costly than the in-home unit?
No, it's actually only about $10 extra a month. The cost for the in-home unit is $29.95 per month. And the mobile unit is $39.95 per month, and it is with no contract fees, no equipment fees, no activation fees, etc. So that is their cost.
There's no setup fee?
Nothing at all.
Okay, because I've heard of other companies, and it can be as high as $250
Yes.
to set it up.
It can.
Wow.
So the unit would come to them prepackaged. It's easy to set up with full instructions. And so they would have full access to everything. When they call customer service to place the order, it's about a 48-hour turnaround before the unit's in their home. So it's very quick. And most people that call us have a fairly immediate need, or they would not be contacting us. So we do our best to have a very quick turnaround with the family.
Well, I love that there's no setup or
And then
or
no
activation
setup
fee.
and no. So the good thing about having no contract is that it is both short-term and long-term use, because you might have someone that, let's say, just had hip surgery and they're generally okay and they feel safe, but right now their mobility is lessened because of their surgery. So the family would feel more comfortable if for the next, let's say, 3 to 6 months, they have something on their person to allow them to contact if needed.
That's great.
So that's the good thing about no contract, is that if it's a short-term need, which sometimes it is, it can do that, but then it can also be put into place as part of that person's lifestyle from this point on.
And we're talking about a contract, so I'm assuming most other companies make folks sign a contract.
Some do. Some
and
do.
what
So
is
it's
the
good to
typical
know.
length of a contract?
Usually a year is
Okay.
what I see.
Okay.
So it's just good to know exactly if a contract's involved, if they're set up. And the other hidden cost that I find that we do not have is a lot of people want to pay by monthly bill. Because they're very frightened to give someone else their credit card number or their banking information. So a lot of seniors especially are very frightened to provide that. And with some companies, what I've found is if you want a monthly bill, there's actually a much higher rate per month for the unit because of the fees associated with having to process that monthly check. Now, our preference, of course, is for the auto payment, either through credit card or the bank if the person is comfortable with that. But everything would be the same cost regardless, which allows for the flexibility for those areas where it might be less comfortable for the family.
Okay, that's great. So let's tell some stories about how you've helped folks with this, because I'm always an advocate of helping people visualize. You're never going to be motivated or influenced to make a move unless you really truly hear the impact that it's had on somebody else's life. So let's talk about one of your stories that really touched you.
Okay. I think part of my most rewarding portions of my career were centered around hospice care. And I think that's where you and I originally connected. First hospice and then through. It's a wonderful, wonderful blessing. And the services are great. And I had the pleasure of being a hospice social worker for 2 years. And so I was welcomed into people's homes at a very difficult point in their life. And often you became almost like a family member because you were with them in a very raw place, in a place of lots of despair and lots of loss and changes and such. And
fear.
Oh, lots of fear. Lots of loss of control, which is a huge thing that hospice families deal with. And one example where I've utilized this in that situation was, families that had been married for 30, 40, 50 years. What I found was often the healthy person, the caregiver, is the one that actually dies first. And that was the case in my own family. So my grandmother had extensive COPD, non-smoking related, which was very odd. My grandfather was the healthy one. Well, my grandfather was going in for a balloon procedure to check an artery blockage and died on the table. Lord. So my grandmother, who had much higher need, was oxygen dependent, had multiple medications, became the responsibility of our family, which is, of course, was welcomed, but it was a huge change. And so when I was working with hospice patients, I would be dealing with families that might be losing the caregiver as opposed to the care receiver, because in most couple dynamics, there is one or the other. Most of the time, they are not on stable ground when it comes to who's the care receiver and who's the care provider. So personally, I've seen that. Professionally, the case where I found this really helpful was the sweet lady had lost her husband, and they had been married in excess of 40 years. Well, she had never been alone in their home prior to his passing.
That's scary.
And so for her, as I know you experienced, I experienced, if I'm home alone and my husband's traveling for work, I hear every squirrel in the attic. I hear the ice maker. I hear what I think is the front door. I hear what I think is the back door. And it's very, very frightening, and especially at night, to be alone and to feel alone. And with her, the lady that I'm referring to, she had things that were put off because, all of a sudden the caregiver was ill, not her. So she was having, the family and she were having to focus on his care needs, which was a natural progression of things. But what happened was a lot of her stuff got put on the back burner. So when he passed, all of a sudden the focus was placed on her, but you had a very tired, very frail, very scared, very changed woman that needed to feel secure in something.
And that's so overwhelming. I mean, I lived that. It was divorce, not death, but same thing. Now all of a sudden, the buck stops here. There is no one to go to for help. And what an amazing thing to provide a senior woman peace of mind.
Very much so. And I hate to use that cliche because I think it's
so
overused.
True.
But if it's true, it's true. And I think it just embodies the actual feeling that it's not only a peace of mind, but it's a peace of heart. I mean, it really gives you that satisfaction.
A connection that the buck doesn't stop with you. You have help at the push of a button. I mean, That's more than peace of mind. That's ability to sleep at night.
And what we don't factor in is, yes, this wife, the spouse, has experienced great loss, but so has the family. So the same sadness and emotional response, detachment, denial, fear, grief, etc., is experienced by the family. So you have a family that is absorbing this care responsibility that too is grieving. And that's just one example. I mean, Lord, I could speak for 3 hours on examples that I've seen that this has been a benefit. And of course, chronic illness, increased risk of falls. You know, I've dealt with so many people that have Parkinsonian-based symptoms. They have vertigo-type symptoms. I know I've dealt with a lot of people in my personal family with neuropathy, which is typically a diabetic condition where you're losing sensation in your extremities. So people will have increased falls because they're not really feeling their feet. And if you lose sense of your feet, that's a problem. And I had a very sweet man that I took care of at the nursing home that had horrible diabetic neuropathy. And he was actually in his recliner at night and he fell asleep. Well, he had a space heater at his feet, which it was cold. It was comfortable for him. Well, what happened is as he got more comfortable, he was sliding down into the recliner. Well, his neuropathy was so bad that his feet actually went onto the heater and he experienced burns on both feet because he could not feel the sensation of pain in his feet. So I think, like I said, you know, as people age, as their bodies age, as conditions, and we're dealing with so much in our population with obesity and depression and dementia and all kinds of complicating factors on top of physical conditions and mental health conditions and all of those that, you know, it all interplays. And as people age, we're just going to see more and more of that. You know, it's an unfortunate piece of aging, not always natural, but it's what a lot of people experience as they age.
So, you know, as you talk, I'm thinking about my own mother who is living here now in one of the senior ranch home subdivisions. And they're healthy and they go out and they do and they there's no real health issues there, but it's that fall. It's that fall that we see all the time, especially, well, I don't know if it's especially, I don't know the statistics, but I've heard so much with women and osteoporosis and that broken hip and how that leads to so much decline in the next 2 years after the fall. So do you have a percentage of just older Americans that are buying this as a safety precaution, or are you still seeing that this is being used after a condition where they've already had a fall and they're worried about the second time?
Our society in general is very reactive.
Yeah,
so I can say that the majority of what we see is going to be in reactive nature. We hope to change that dynamic, and that's why they are bringing people like myself on board to provide that education to try to change the dynamic, but we're slow to change, and we know this. But I think what's most important, I do not have statistics exactly on the use of the product, but I do have a couple statistics from the CDC about risk, one of which is saying that in people over the age of 65, 1 in every 3 adults will experience falls. And of those falls, 20 to 30% result in serious injury. So this includes deep cuts or lacerations, fractures, as well as head injury. And we're finding, of course, most deaths are related to the head injury, but the other things can leave you in a very debilitating position. And, you know, often with fractures, sometimes they're exposed fractures. So you're dealing with blood loss as well as the fracture, et cetera.
You know, I'm really thinking any older person who lives alone should have this. You know, I'm thinking, I had a friend who actually lost a parent because they fell in the home and weren't found for 3 days. And we don't ever want to think about, you know, that happening to us. And it's $29.95 a month, but I'm in this business, you're in this business. We know just how often this occurs. And for $30 a month, you know, you pay for a cell phone.
And I don't want to use a scare tactic.
No,
I'm not
scary,
one, but I think that, you know, the biggest thing is we, like I said, we live in a very reactive society, not a proactive society, but we also live in one that has horrid amounts of denial. We look at our parents, we do not want to see them age. It's very hard for me now. My dad is now in his early 70s, my mom in her early 60s, and it's hard for me now to look at my dad as an older gentleman. I look at him and he cracks me up. He's very, I'm not going to call him immature, but he's very childlike. He's very pure and just a wonderful person to be around. So if you saw him, you would think there's no way he's his age. But there's some things that he says, Brandi, he is getting older. But it's very hard to see him through that lens because he's never been there before. So I think as a society, we just want to hold on to what we know. And one of the best examples I've ever had of that was one of the most heart-wrenching things I've ever been a part of, was I took care of a gentleman in the nursing home. And he was a very esteemed pharmacist in the area. And he had a brief stint in skilled nursing for some rehab. And in the course of things, they found that he had diabetes. So he was all of a sudden an insulin-dependent diabetic. Well, this pharmacist, of course, knew tons about insulin medications and everything else. And he got home, and I remember very clearly getting a call from the family member, and they said, "My dad cannot manage his own medication." Which, if you can imagine a family member of a pharmacist who has spent decades managing everyone else's meds to come to the realization that he cannot dose his own medication safely, that's frightening. That's scary. That's a brand new lens that you're looking through. And it caused panic to the family because, they always look to him to doing that role. And for them to actually admit that this is no longer a safe thing for him to be handling was hard on so many levels for the family. And I think, the denial factored in because they are staring at him through this lens that they've always known. And so I think in the denial portion, it's really frightening when people refuse to take a good, hard, honest look at people and their environment and everything going around them, because but it takes that, and not once, but frequently, that you constantly reassess how that person is and how they're handling things.
Yeah, and I don't believe in using scare tactics to make people move. But as we're talking, I'm thinking about someone I know who had a fall, just moved to Georgia, lives alone in a senior apartment. And you know what? This would be a great thing for her to have, uses a walker. And you spend all kinds of time, energy, money, thought to move a loved one closer to you, but give them independence by letting them live alone. That's the perfect scenario for this medical alert bracelet or necklace or mobile unit, whatever it is that you choose, because one fall is a predisposition to another fall.
It can, yes.
And we want to keep our loved ones as independent as possible. And this is a beautiful way to do so.
Well, and I think, too, the thing that we factor in is our loved ones want to stay as independent as possible.
Well,
and
true.
Sometimes as family members, professional caregivers, or personal caregivers, we stare at them and we know they're not safe. We know that's not an ideal situation, but they're the last say. So, unless you receive guardianship over that person, they're making the decisions. So often as family members, you have someone that wants to be at home, and do you blame them? When I think about my future and, working in the nursing home setting, there's no one in that building that would say, I want to grow old and move into the nursing home. That's not a reality that anyone wants. It is reality for a lot of people, and that's okay. But the fact of the matter is, if the person is at home, wishes to remain at home, you want to try to support that as long as you can safely. And if not in a home environment, then what I call at the lowest level of care. So if it is a senior apartment, if it is a personal care home, if it is an assisted living, if it is with home care, if it is with geriatric care managers coming in, whatever it takes to keep that person and to honor that independence, because as their home, they say home is where the heart is. Home is where you're happy. And I think most people, that's their place of memory. That's their place where they've had Thanksgiving dinners and children grow up and just things that have happened in that home, that's where they want their environment to be. So if it is safe, which is what I always stress, we never encourage the use of anything that would make anyone have an illusion of safety.
A false sense of safety.
And that's why I want to factor in the fact of the observation piece and how important that is, of exactly what you're looking at, how you're helping them. And I hope we have a chance to go into some of that
well,
today.
Well, let's do that now because we never have enough time. So let's go for it right now if it's important.
Okay. Let's talk for a minute about looking at the person. And I think that is a huge thing, is to take an honest look at the person. That's not something we do frequently. And this is also something that you can self-check. So this is if you're looking at yourself and your condition, or you're helping a family member or a friend. It is huge to look at a couple things. One, how are they in their home setting? But that can be a real illusion because, as you know, as I know, if I said, Jeannie, go through your morning routine, you could do it with your eyes closed. Right. And a lot of people, even if they have cognitive deficit or physical deficit, they have figured out a way to look well.
Yes.
And so if you're looking at them in that scenario, you're like, Mom's doing just fine. You know, and so they know every piece of furniture and where it's placed and how to go from point A to B safely. They've got it figured out. And it doesn't take a lot of thought process to do something that you do routinely. Mm-hmm. So I tell people, look at them in the home and look at them out of the home. And make sure when you're looking at them outside of the home setting that you do both familiar and unfamiliar locations. And give them, don't test them, bless their heart. You know, don't go and be like, Mom, I need you to take 5 steps forward and 5 steps back. But, you know, put them in a situation like a mall. See what comes of it. Do they have increased anxiety? Are they confused? Can they follow simple direction, etc.? Double check on things like psychiatric conditions such as depression. There's something out there that's very misunderstood called delirium, which can look like dementia but have medical causes such as dehydration, infection, etc. So, and a lot of times what I notice is people attribute decline as normal aging, which it isn't always.
No.
So they'll say, as my dad says, oh, I'm getting old timers instead of Alzheimer's, you know? So there are things that can happen, and there are things that are not a natural point of aging. But it's important to look at that from a...
Well, as you're talking, what is coming up for me is it Maddie's call? When you hear more and more, and I think we just had one again last week where a woman is lost.
Yes.
And we can't find her.
Yes.
And so as you were speaking this entire radio show, I'm thinking this is not a good option for people with dementia because they're not going to remember to hit a button. But in those early stages where they're still at home, they're still driving, it's so difficult for a loved one to take the keys. As we know, being in this field, that's one of the major issues for someone with early dementia. That's when this button is needed most, in those early stages, so that we can prevent, because if they drive and forget where they are, they got the button.
And there's other things, like as you know, there are multiple types of dementia. So Alzheimer's is not the only type, and progression can be very different depending on the type of dementia. And I've worked with people that have a dementia where their memory is quite intact, which is odd, but their impulse control, their sense of safety, etc., can be very off. And I've worked with many families that end up in South Carolina when they go to the grocery store, and it's very frightening. So, you know, I would not say that our product is good across the board for those with dementia. And again, it takes that observation of where is she now? Where is he now? What products, etc., can I put into place to help with current situation, knowing that may change down the road.
Again, that's what I like about Brandi being in this field, because her social work background is going to be first and foremost about what is the best product for you. Whether it is this product or not, you can't help but care manage them and make sure they get the best thing for them.
Definitely.
Again, Brandi, can you give out your contact phone number so that if someone after hearing this show wants to get more information, they can get in touch with your customer service number?
Yes, definitely. The customer service number for Metro Atlanta Medical Alert is 1-800-215-4206, or also more information can be found on our website at www.medalert.net.
And again, I say it every week, I am blessed that I have been chosen to do this radio show to help get information out to seniors and the loved ones. And we talk a lot about seniors, but this could be for a lot of folks that are disabled as well.
Definitely.
Before the crisis occurs. So I hope if you've heard something today that has triggered you to get more information, that you pick up the phone and do call that number right now so that we can at least get you informed and get your loved ones some help for $29.95 a month. It is well worth it. Brandi, thanks so much for joining me again this week. It's been great to see you and good information for our audiences. I'm Jeannie Pete. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day and week ahead, and listen here, same time next week and every week. Homestead Hope Foundation is your resource for a healthy life. God bless.